On an autumn day in 1760, a woman's funeral was held in London. So many mourners crowded outside the church that the crowd was estimated at 10,000. So many that it suggests a royal burial. But the deceased was far from royal. She was Maria Coventry, born Maria Gunning, and raised in obscurity in County Roscommon, Ireland. Yet during the second half of her short life, Maria would have been well accustomed to adoring and curious crowds. The Gunning sisters, Maria and Elizabeth, were beautiful, no doubt, but their effect on the population was extreme, bordering on bizarre. We are told that at times they required sword-bearing guards to protect them from the fevered masses, that people stayed up all night to be in a position to catch just a glimpse of one descending from a carriage. In George Selwyn's memoirs, he writes, "Someone proposes a stroll to Betty's fruit shop. Suddenly the cry is raised, 'The Gunnings are coming!' and we all tumble out to gaze and criticize." In 18th century Georgian high society, a well-to-do lady aspired to catch herself a titled husband. With fierce competition from other equally ambitious debutantes to attract the eye of an eligible bachelor, interlopers, in other words, those not of the privileged classes, were not made welcome in high society circles, which makes the story of the Gunning sisters, Maria and Elizabeth, all the more unusual. The two sisters were landed gentry, and though not paupers, were far from wealthy. Yet they did have one attribute in abundance, their great beauty. Maria was born in Hemmingford Gray, Huntingdonshire, and was the eldest child of John Gunning of Castle Coote, County Roscommon, and his wife Bridget Burke, daughter of Theobald Burke, 6th Viscount Mayo. They returned to Ireland in about 1741, to their estate and home of Castle Coote, a ruined ancient castle with lovely grounds and a substantial house attached. It would appear debts were run up that could not be paid. The mother and children took a house in Dublin, while their father hid from creditors. There is one story that an actress, Mrs. Bellamy, heard raised voices on the other side of a wall, rushed inside the strange house to help, interrupted a fight over eviction, and rescued Mrs. Gunning and her beautiful children with a loan. Maria's younger siblings were Elizabeth, Sophia, Lizzie, and John. She was still a girl when her mother put her and her younger sister Elizabeth on stage at the Smock Alley Theatre, Dublin, in order to earn their living. There they became friends with well-known actors such as Peg Woffington. However, other sources deny this and point out that Margaret Woffington did not arrive in Dublin until May 1751, by which time Maria and her sister Elizabeth were already in England. acting was a potentially disastrous move for their reputations, because most actresses were considered harlots. Indeed, many worked after hours as courtesans to boost their income. However, it would certainly put a young woman in the spotlight, and might open the doors to wealthy patrons. Despite the risk, their honour survived. In October 1748, a ball was held at Dublin Castle by the Viscountess Petersham, and the sisters were graced with an invite. Unfortunately, the two sisters did not have any dresses of quality suitable for the gathering. Tom Sheridan, a manager of one of the local theatres, came to their rescue. He supplied them with two costumes, those of Lady Macbeth and Juliet. Wearing the costumes, they were presented to the Earl of Harrington, the then Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. Harrington must have been pleased by the meeting, because by 1750, their mother Bridget Gunning had persuaded him to grant her a lifetime pension, which she then used to transport herself, Maria and Elizabeth back to their original home in Huntingdon, England. In England, their attendance at local balls and parties soon attracted attention. The beauty of the two girls was much remarked upon. They became well-known celebrities, their fame reaching all the way to London, and they themselves following soon afterwards. On the 2nd of December 1750, they were presented at the court of St. James. By this time, they were sufficiently famous that the presentation was noted in the London newspapers. The sisters entered London society already feted as beauties, and took it by storm. This was unusual for the day, where manners, breeding, grace, and connections dictated how beautiful a lady was. Although her beginnings were humble, Maria Gunning would go on to become one of the most celebrated beauties of her day. Horace Walpole wrote of them as two Irish girls of no fortune who make more noise than any of their predecessors since the days of Helen, and are declared the handsomest women alive. Maria, who was notoriously tactless, was reported to have made a notable gaffe by telling the elderly George II, when asked by him which spectacle she would most like to see, replied in all earnest, "A royal funeral, your Majesty." Some reports say coronation. Fortunately, the king was highly amused. He could not have known then that his son Frederick, Prince of Wales, with whom he had a difficult relationship, was to die on the 31st of March 1751 of a burst abscess in his lung. Within a year, Maria's sister Elizabeth had married the Duke of Hamilton. In March 1752, Maria married the 6th Earl of Coventry and became the Countess of Coventry. For their honeymoon, the Earl and Countess travelled around Europe accompanied by Lady Petersham, but neither lady enjoyed it much, especially Maria, who particularly disliked Paris. The Countess, being unable to speak French, and her husband's decision not to allow her to wear red powder as makeup, which was fashionable in Paris at the time, intensified her dislike of the city and the trip. Sophisticated ladies of Louis XV's court, and above all the King's mistress, Madame de Pompadour, prized pale white skin and applied rouge to their cheeks. Whiteness was the status symbol of the age, distinguishing a lady of breeding who could afford to spend her days indoors from a woman with tan skin who had to work in the fields for a living. On one occasion, her husband saw her arrive at a dinner party. Maria had followed suit and applied the white powder with rouge. Her husband was furious. He took out his handkerchief and chased her around the table so as to rub it all off, embarrassing her in front of all of the guests. Both Elizabeth and Maria had married two of the most eligible men in England. They were judged successes, though whether their marriages were happy is another matter. It was when Elizabeth was between husbands that she posed for the celebrated artist Joshua Reynolds. Both sisters were quite tall. Elizabeth's willowy figure in the portrait and fashionably attractive colouring was much celebrated. Elizabeth's first husband, the Duke of Hamilton, was a notorious rake and gambling addict, who insisted on marriage shortly after meeting her. The second, John Campbell, the Duke of Argyll, was despised by Walpole as sordidly covetous. Nonetheless, Elizabeth seems to have developed a steeliness about the whole business. She had 8 children, served as Lady of the Bedchamber to Queen Charlotte, and died peacefully at Argyll House at the age of 57. Maria's popularity and beauty was such that on her return to London she was mobbed when she appeared in Hyde Park, and was eventually given a guard by the King, led by the Earl of Pembroke. It was reported that more than 700 people stayed up all night in and around an inn just to see the sisters pass in their chaise the next morning. She became the toast of Vauxhall. She delighted audiences at the New Spring Gardens and at West End shows, and admirers flocked to the stage door after her performances. Her shoemaker even charged people 6 pence just to see her dainty shoes. Her husband became involved with then-famous courtesan Kitty Fisher, which caused Maria much distress. Unlike most other aristocratic wives, she did not look the other way. According to one account, in the park, Lady Coventry asked Kitty Fisher for the name of the dressmaker who had made her dress. Kitty Fisher answered that the lady had better ask Lord Coventry, as he had given her the dress as a gift. To that, Maria raged at her impertinence. Maria also became involved in at least one affair. She was rumoured to have been involved romantically with the 3rd Duke of Grafton, but this was never confirmed beyond doubt. In 1773, Boswell complained bitterly of her coldness and ill-mannered behaviour towards himself, but she appears to have been all politeness to Johnson. Boswell consoled himself for her rudeness by the remark, "When I recollected that my punishment was inflicted by so dignified a beauty, I had that kind of consolation which a man would feel who is strangled by a silken cord." Describing portraits of the Misses Gunning, a certain Mr. Walford says, "The two sisters are very much alike. Both are remarkable for their small mouths, high foreheads, aquiline noses, and arched eyebrows. Certainly Maria would be adjudged by the ladies nowadays the prettier in detail. She is slim and elegant, though rather inanimate, but I much prefer the looks of Elizabeth, who is darker, plumper, and more intelligent, and altogether a finer woman." Her straying husband's aversion to Maria wearing cosmetics was strangely prophetic. A woman famed for beauty, she did everything she could to preserve that image. Each day she would spend hours in front of a 7-foot mirror, painting her face, ready to be seen before her doting public. The mid-18th century mirror is described as being surmounted by an elaborately pierced and carved basket of flowers above acanthus scrolls and mirrored borders. It was designed by the cabinet-making father and son firm of William and John Linnell in 1759, and purchased as a gift from her husband. She preferred the heavy makeup that was fashionable in some quarters. For a whitener, she used ceruse, a combination of lead oxide, hydroxide and carbonate. For rouge, cinnabar, a scarlet form of mercury sulfide, and for lipstick, fucus or seaweed extract, which also contained mercury. The poisonous nature of these compounds was not understood at this time. Fortunately, most women only used cosmetics on special occasions. But for Maria, it was the daily application of cosmetics that proved lethal. The lead, mixed with the moisture in her skin, formed acids that ate away at her face. Her skin began to peel off, leaving hideous scars. The more the scars showed, the more white lead paste she felt necessary to cover them. Little by little, the mercury seeped into her veins, and she started to feel very ill. So upset was she by her skin blemishes that she spent her final year in a darkened room, reportedly hidden away with only a dim light, so upset was she over her ruined beauty. She did, however, still go out in public on occasions, despite her increasing reclusiveness. One chronicler wrote, "With all the spirit of a true belle, she refused to quit the paths of pleasure, and was seen attending a celebrated murder trial only a few days before she was forced to take to her bed." Lady Coventry passed away on September the 30th, 1760, aged 27. The official cause of death was consumption, known today as tuberculosis. Many people referred to her premature end as death by vanity, because it was rumoured that lead poisoning from her makeup contributed to her death. The same cause of death was rumoured to have caused the demise of her rival, Kitty Fisher. Maria was never diagnosed with lead poisoning while she was alive, and no post-mortem examination was conducted on her body. The only way for scientists to confirm whether or not she had dangerous amounts of lead in her system would be to exhume her remains to test her bones, teeth, or fingernails. The public fascination continued even after her death. A crowd of 10,000 clamoured to catch a glimpse of her coffin. Pale death ensured that Maria no longer needed white lead paste ever again. Well, my dears, yet another in the Fickle Fate series. Another rags to riches story with an unhappy ending in this case. Fickle Fate. Could you imagine that rapid rise to stardom? There's no other word to describe it. They were stars practically overnight once they reached London. Amazing. It must have been a bit much for these girls. I mean, and back then the crowds could be dangerous too. No wonder they needed guards to protect them. Pretty scary stuff. The people could get quite rough back then. It seemed that Elizabeth was the more level-headed of the two. She didn't really seek out this exposure to the public. Maria went along with the wave. Don't blame her. She had some fun while it lasted and ended up living the life of an aristocrat. Whether that be good or bad, we don't know in this case. Her husbands didn't seem the best catchers, really, although they might have had title and money. The second one there, he looked like a right bastard, didn't he? Just the arrogance in that portrait. You can see it coming through. Yes, they really didn't know what they were putting on their faces back then. These poisonous products. I mean, I guess there's a lot of stuff we're ingesting today. We don't really know what's in it, what the government's putting in it. Yeah, getting back to beauty treatment back then, not a lot has changed nowadays. I guess we have a bit more awareness of what is in beauty products, but people are still doing silly things for the sake of beauty. I mean, just look at Hollywood with the older actors, what they are doing to their faces with this plastic surgery and Botox and Oh my goodness, in some cases they end up looking quite alien, horrific. I guess they look in the mirror and they think they look beautiful, but to me, I would like to know your opinion. To me, some of them look absolutely grotesque. I mean, look at Lionel. Is it Lionel Richie? Yeah, Lionel Richie, to mention but a few. I don't know. Sometimes I think they just go too far. Maybe it didn't work out in the first operation, so they try and correct that, and then keep going from there, and it ends up just looking really weird. I much prefer actors like Anthony Hopkins, who just age naturally. It looks so much better. I don't know why certain people think that this plastic surgery enhances. I guess in rare cases, the very few, where they have a very good plastic surgeon and the minimum is done. A little bit of stretching, maybe a slight, nose job or something where needed. A bit of fullness to the lips, and I say a bit, not that they end up looking like fish lips, a kipper, but that can enhance. I will say that, but some of them just go too far. And I guess probably in 100 years, there's going to be someone making a video about them, thinking how ridiculous such a concept was. It is crazy to think, though, that she was only 27. I'm sure she was still a very attractive woman without the makeup. It just became that obsession because when she went out in public, they expected to see that pale, ultra pale complexion, and she paid the price for it. Her sister obviously wasn't wearing those great amounts of gunky makeup, and so lived to the relatively grand age of 57 in those days. Well, they didn't live very long. Well, I'm not going to talk too much on this one. It is nearly Christmas, and I do hope you have enjoyed your year with me, and hopefully, God willing, there will be more to come. Anyway, my dears, we are closing now with my Christmas speech, and I would love to know your feedback on this presentation. Let the curtains rise. My dear friends, thank you so much for joining me the whole year in Oddie's Theatre of Fickle Fate. I do hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have enjoyed having you as my audience. And so it is that time to wish you all a very warm and loving Christmas, celebrating with your friends and family. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, I wish you the same. A warm and loving time with your family and friends, and wishing you all the best of health and success in the new year. It is now time for the curtains to close, and we will go out with a lovely Christmas tune to get us in the mood. Take care, my friends. God bless, and bye-bye.